Hello, and welcome to my third lecture in this continuous ongoing lecture series. The title of this lecture is called Documentation. Confronted with the purpose of documentation for art and life, to allow it to be free or to make it a frozen prisoner that awaits approval. Documentation, not solely a photograph, but a thing that captures something from a moment or an idea generated from a moment, whether that be visually, verbally, or in a written format. The essence to document, held within the unconscious knowledge of the temporality of life, an attempt to understand, an external reference for something we cannot grasp solely based on being alive. Documentation, a validation of sorts, a representation of something that has occurred perhaps, breadcrumbs to past events. Yet a breadcrumb is not a loaf of bread. A brick is not a house. A blade of grass is not a field. Documentation is not reality, rather a concept of something past that will always be in the now. Tangible hearsay, a conversation occurs, memories arise, we have our reference point for guidance. Adorned by mahogany sequences, dressed as a door into a room. The room is of course empty. Those who enter bring their own ornaments and furnishings. Above a shop you will see a sign, a possible indication as to what is housed inside. Entering with preconceived ideas, breadcrumbs from past events create our expectations. If the shop says it sells shoes, you would expect to find shoes. The language used are documents of ideas. The shop window in which one's sight is drawn emulates the sign with its bright and shiny objects. Pavlov's dogs await to enter. Upon entering, you see the shelves are garnished with dead frogs, pairs of frogs, a variety of colours, a variety of sizes, a variety of species. On this occasion, the documentation misleads one into a false sense of understanding. But who has misunderstood? Surely it was the shop owner with their fanciful mirage. Or was it the onlookers who salivated at the prospect of obtaining an idea of something new? They wanted to see what they wanted to see. But what if the owner wore dead frogs as shoes? But as a collective, do we not have an obligation to adhere to expectations, to maintain expectations upon the breadcrumbs of reality? But if reality is made of breadcrumbs, we do not have a full loaf of bread. And scattered upon the floor, we find fragments of the past that lead us back to the way in which we came. Without a reference point, do people wear dead frogs as shoes? But wait, don't we wear dead cows and snakes? Every passing second, documented with vigour, with hope, with gluttonous freedom. The more crumbs, the bigger the loaf, yet the more crumbs, the less of the loaf exists. While shopping, I was pondering through a shop looking for nothing particular. But to my right, a group of young girls had placed a phone upon a shelf, and huddled together they began dancing to the music from the phone, while it recorded their actions. A strange moment it was witnessing a poorly synchronised dance routine to a mumble song that kept saying the word pussy and nigger. A contribution to the documentation of human life within that second. I was an audience member of a low-budget show that I didn't really want to see. I didn't have to purchase a ticket, for it's all now free. We are the directors of our own Truman Show. However, we are aware that we are Truman, a realm engulfed in exhibitionism and voyeurism. Will the pump still pump or the cogs run smooth if we close the curtains and turn off the lights? Expectations of life are drowned in a lack of relevance and reference. That is why we open the blinds and leave the curtains slightly open. It keeps the noose from around our necks. A collection of performance artists will make for a dreadful collection, and those who do not perform on stage perform in the aisles as critics. The performers perform for the critics critique the performers, all under the guise of expectations misled by following documental breadcrumbs. Cartons of orange juice poured over white naked painted bodies. The shop sign states it is to save the rainforest in Borneo. A queue is formed to fall upon the sword of populism if it meant finding a reference point in reality. But let's massage the ego. Oils and candles are in place. Put some whale music on. Feel the hands of the critics as they gently run their hands across your skin. Enjoy it. You deserve it. You are alive, you are a performer, and you deserve to be loved and adored. You are unique. Their fingers and hands continue to apply pressure, their tips digging deep into your tissue. Turn up the whale music, light more candles, more oil, more oil. Their hands begin to crush your body. Your flesh begins to open. Their hands have now torn through your skin. The whale music painfully loud. The oils are sickly. The room is filled with candles. The room has become an oven. But do not despair. The massage was free. Well, it didn't cost any money. And plus you documented it. If you show a small breadcrumb, it gives the impression that you've eaten a full loaf of bread. A full and content human after a beautiful massage. What a time to be alive. Let us put on our suit of armour and climb upon our majestic white horse. We are riding into battle with self-relevance. But I hope your horse can swim too, as we will subconsciously ride upon the waves of being truly insignificant and ephemeral within the oxygenated sphere of life. Emphasis is placed upon the self as a relic, brewed in a self-museum under constant construction, only completed once the curator dies, or the individual rejects themselves as being important enough to look at. A continuous rewatch of the last previous seconds of one's life, making sure the next few seconds are represented in the best ways possible. Existing in a constant delay, eventually missing the last few seconds of being alive. We've become lost in documental breadcrumbs. Inquisitiveness grows towards analogies, metaphors, and abstract documentations that present moments of understanding that far surpass the initial documentation of reality. The bombardment of documentation allows no room to enter. It has no breathing space to be contemplated. You only experience the inside of a vehicle unless you leave the vehicle. Drive through the most wonderful looking landscapes and fly through the vast universe. The windows, a lens that documents ideas outside the vehicle. Multiple segments of documentations that you believe you exist in. However, you only exist within the vehicle, never ventured within the documentation. Take a picture, and upon returning home, you show the picture to a friend. You divulge to them how you visited such a wonderful place. The image and words suggest as such, but the documentation is misleading, as your presence was consistent within the vehicle. No tree was climbed. Your nose did not smell a flower. You did not tap dance upon the rings of Saturn. Documentation creates a false vacuum that wonderfully captures false memories and misconceptions of others. Documentation creates an illusion that everyone begins to believe in. Can we trust the rumours emitted from documentation? Sordid lies that make one gullible? Or is that the majestical law, the beauty of it all, the ability to tell stories, to entice imagination and wonder beyond reality with figments of documentation, or the ability to crush the mind with fear through documentation? Well, so what if I've never danced upon the rings of Saturn? It allowed one to believe it was possible. And what does it matter if I tell lies with documentation to get what I want, or to make people feel sad, or to make me feel better? When documenting the world, I believe it to be very important to be reflective as to the purpose of your documentation. What is the underlying intention of your documentation? It helps to be brutally honest with yourself. After each talk, I ask something of you, a small task to try and complete until the next talk. And the idea I'm looking to do is to play with documentation. So to play with the idea of documentation, I would like you to take 3 images of locations or items. I would then like you to create a story for each one of them. Now the image that you'll be taking a picture of, whether that be an item or a location, it can't be something that you are familiar with. Okay? I'd like you to be very playful with the task and encourage you to vastly expand on your documentation. So like I previously stated, try and take an image of a location that you have not yet visited, or visually familiarise yourself with an object that you have not yet used. Okay, an example of that could be, you take an image of a landscape that you've not explored, but what I want you to do is visualise it as though you have, and create a false memory about that landscape, like what happened there, when did it happen, and anything else that may be of interest. And if you get the opportunity, you can then visit that landscape and see how it works alongside your created memory based on your initial documentation. An extended task of this will be to try it with multiple people, or in smaller groups or larger groups, and visit each other's landscapes or observe each other's objects that you've created such false memories about. And after you've done this, feel free to send me details of your work, or share any ideas, or pose any disagreements or arguments that you may have. After all, we are all performers and critics in some form. And finally, while there is no purpose to life, one must do something that brings them joy or a feeling of completeness, and not something that lusts for relevance or acceptance. Thank you.